So I haven't really seen a lot of content on YouTube regarding making church recap videos. And as a church video producer and also a freelancer who works with a lot of churches, that's probably one of the most common videos that I make. So the event is called Neon Night. It's a student ministry event. It's actually the 6th time I've filmed it since 2017, 2018. So it's really cool, great that I keep getting invited back to make a recap of their event, and also really cool to see my skills improve over time year after year. So in this video, I'm gonna break down the pre-production, production, and post-production process of making that entire video. And I think it's gonna be really good because I haven't seen a lot of content on pre-production, production, and post-production on recap videos. So if you haven't seen the recap video of Neon Night 2023, it is live on my channel. You can click right up here and watch it. But the very first thing that I'm gonna get started with in pre-production is planning. So in my project management software that I use called Notion, I made a new client project for Grace Church, which is who I was shooting for, just called Neon Night 2023, and I started to go through some tasks that I wanted to have done beforehand. So these are all checked off because the event is done, but I just wanted to give you an example of kind of how I plan for events. So I made this header just called tasks, and then a few for prep, some stuff the day of, and then post after the event. Just things that I wanted to remember to do basically. And Notion has this really cool feature that I can just type at remind tomorrow or remind on a certain day. So a lot of those day of events, I actually just set a reminder for the day of so I know I don't forget them. So that's kind of how I handle a lot of the to-dos. And then I have a lot of other info in here, like some social content that I wanted to capture while I was there, like my what's in my bag. So if you want to see a lot of the gear that I took, you can check out that video, as well as just some notes that I had down for editing and some of the music options I had. So it's great to just have one page I can put all the information that I need for this one event on. And then as you can see, find music and inspo, and then some other content ideas for that day are 3 of the tasks that I have under the prep. So I'll start with music. Music is such an integral part of recap videos. It can be overstated. It drives so much of the pace and so much of the energy of the recap videos depending on the event. So I use Artlist for all of my music, and basically what I'll do is just go in there, create a collection for this event and for this year, and then just go through and spend 30 minutes to an hour just looking through music, finding some that I think could work, maybe a few different genres, a few different styles of music that I want to add to this collection. So I think for this one I actually ended up with like 7 or 8 different tracks in that collection that just kind of drove how I wanted to shoot it. And then after the event I'll go back into that and actually pick out which music I think would actually work for the footage that I got. So the second thing that I do after an event is get some inspiration together. This typically just comes from either Vimeo, Instagram, YouTube. Those are the typical ones, but I can also put this on this Notion page and add some inspiration at the bottom, maybe some elements I want to pull from videos that other churches have done, anything like that that just will influence how I film this upcoming video. I don't have a ton of content of me talking about the event while I'm there, but I did want to go through kind of how I did it, my mindset in filming, and some of my equipment setup, stuff like that. So I already did a full camera gear breakdown video on my YouTube channel. You can check that out if you're interested in everything that's in my bag when I go film church events. But for this one, all I used was my Sony a7 IV, which I'm filming on right now, which is an awesome camera and really good for events. And I actually shot this whole thing on my 35mm f1.8, which I'm also filming on right now. I shot it all in 60 frames per second, which means on the Sony a7 IV, it crops into APS-C mode, so it's about a 1.5 times crop on the lens. So it ended up being 55 millimeters on the 35mm lens, and that actually worked out really good. I used that for the whole time. It allowed me to get some low light shots of the crowd of people worshiping and stuff, which is usually a lot darker, so f1.8 really helped out on that. And then, like I said, shooting in 60 frames per second. This really just depends year to year. Sometimes I shoot in all 24 frames. Sometimes I mix it up and do like 80% 24 frames and then 20% 60 for slow motion. But this time I just decided to do all 60, so I'd have the option of slowing anything down. And I thought that was great. I think that was a good decision, especially with the music. That kind of plays into how I want the edit to look. So it's kind of what I was feeling this year. I shot this whole event in 4K. I just don't shoot a lot of 1080p anymore. I think 4K is just It's way too easy to shoot. Even with the crop in 4K 60 on my camera, I still just think it's way better than 1080p. I mean, even as much as YouTube just compresses 1080p so much more than 4K. So I just shoot 4K in basically everything. I also think 1080p, as far as like just the image quality on the A7 IV and how it's scaling down, is just way too soft. I also shot this in 10-bit S-Log3. I only really use 8-bit for like YouTube videos when I'll shoot in S-Cinetone, so I don't need all the depth out of the color if I were shooting in S-Log3. But for events and some of those bigger projects, I always do 10-bit in S-Log3, and I'll show you a little bit of my color grading workflow in the post-production process. I shot 2 SD cards for redundancy, especially when I'm doing freelance work. I don't want anything to happen to my files. Luckily, it hasn't yet, and I think that's largely because I shoot 2 SD cards and record all the footage to both of them. And really that doesn't take me a whole lot more time or use up a whole lot more storage if I'm shooting pretty conservatively and being really intentional with what I shoot. I shot the whole thing handheld. I just love the handheld look. I've used gimbals. I have a glide cam. I don't really use it much anymore just because, one, it's really tough with the wind as opposed to electronic gimbals, which I think do much better in the wind or outdoor environments and stuff like that. And I also think it's way too tough to adjust camera settings on the fly because you're holding your gimbal and it's moving and you're trying to change the settings and start recording, stop recording. All that stuff is it's just time that I don't really want to spend on that when I'm shooting events. And when I'm switching from the stage to shooting the crowd, I usually bump up my ISO, maybe aperture, and it's just so much harder to do on a gimbal. So that's my personal preference. I also love the handheld look. I think it brings such a cool energy. And most of the time, even if I'm walking or moving really fast, just the handheld shake just looks really good in my opinion. Lastly, for production, I did bring my drone, but I just didn't use it because it got too dark in the outdoor portion. Well, that's pretty much it for the production process of this video. I want to move on to the post-production. There's a lot I want to cover in there because it's such a crucial part of making recap videos, and editing is really challenging for me, but I feel like I picked up some good tips that might be able to help you in making recap videos or event videos. So the first part I want to start with for post-production is the folder structure. It's pretty straightforward. I know most people just have their own folder structure, but I figured I would just show you mine. So I have a Neon Night 2023 folder that holds everything I need. I edit this in DaVinci Resolve, so there's no project file located actually in the folder because DaVinci Resolve uses databases. So it starts with just an export folder at the very top. I just put an underscore at the very beginning so that it stays at the very top of the folder, just personal preference. And then I also have some behind the scenes content, some graphic elements that I used. Some of these are just thumbnails and some of these are like some text layers that I use, graphics. And then music, I have quite a few music tracks, some of them that I did end up using, some of them I didn't, as well as my After Effects project, which I used for some of the visual effects, some videos for my phone, sound effects, and then Sony, which is my main folder for all the footage. So that's pretty much it for my folder structure. I thought I would just kind of show you how I lay stuff out, but I do want to move into the actual edit. So I have a pretty specific process that I use for editing with timelines. This applies to Resolve, Premiere, any editor that you use. And really that just consists of making a sort timeline where I move good shots up a video layer. And I'll go through these stages a little more in depth here in a second. But then the second one is select timeline, where I just have all the good shots. And then the third one is an actual recap timeline where I take all the good clips that I selected and arrange them along with the music and any voiceovers or things like that onto the final edit. So that first stage, making a sort timeline, is really just me taking all the footage, dumping it all onto one timeline, and then just cutting clips or finding good segments of clips, cutting them, moving them up a video layer, and that just tells me that that's a good clip. This also applies to audio. So if there's a good voiceover, a good speaking clip, or even a good audio snippet of the crowd screaming or something like that, then I'll just slide that down a video layer, and I know that's good audio that I might want to use later on. And then once I'm done with that, all I do is duplicate that timeline, select all the footage still on the first video layer, delete that, and then clear the gaps so that now I just have a timeline called selects, which is all the good clips from my entire shoot. And then from there, you can do one of two things. You can either just start editing from an additional timeline and just drag clips in, or sometimes what I'll do is make a new timeline and copy all those clips over, and that way I can kind of drag and arrange them where I want. And that also helps because I know what clips I've used and which ones I've yet to use. So that's my kind of basic structure of how I edit these kind of recap projects. More on the technical side, I'll actually show you my project settings down here in the corner. So I'm editing in 4K, 23.976 frames per second. Everything else is pretty much the default, except under color management, I have it set to DaVinci YRGB color science, timeline color space, Rec 709, Gamma 2.4, and then the output is the same as the timeline. So I'll show you a few more points on how I color grade, but that's basically how my project is set up. Now, sometimes I also will make proxies for my footage, which just makes editing it just that much faster. For this one I did because I know I was going to spend a lot of time editing it and it would be well worth the time, and DaVinci Resolve builds proxies from footage really fast, so it really doesn't take that much time at all. But for shorter projects, it's usually fine. I don't need to make proxies for everything, but for this one I knew I was going to be sorting through footage, so I went ahead and made I think 1080p ProRes proxies, so it is a lower resolution than 4K and also ProRes, so not compressed at all. Edits way faster than the original like H.264 files. But in my media pool, I just have two folders, one for source and one for timelines. So under timelines, I have a couple different versions, like version 1 and version 2. And what I do is edit for a while, and then if I want to take a different path and if I want to try something different, I'll just duplicate the timeline, call it version 2 or version 3 or whatever, and then kind of go down that path and see how that works out. But that way I always have a timeline to come back to if it doesn't work out really well. Here you can see my selects timeline that's already here, as well as the finals. I have like the regular recap as well as a vertical one that I'll talk about here in a minute. But I also have a source bin, and that includes pretty much everything else that I use in my projects, like just the footage, music, graphics, sound effects, some footage from my phone, any of the visual effects. And then here's my final timeline. This is the main recap that I built some other versions off of, but this is my primary one. So I have some markers up here with some ideas that I had while I was editing. This one, I kind of wanted the thumbnail frame from this clip. I thought it'd be really cool, so that's where I got that from. And then you can see at the beginning, that's just a text layer, and then all the footage, all the audio that I used, stuff like that. So I'm just gonna kind of walk through my thought process editing it off of this main timeline and some of my thoughts that I had and some of the decisions I make. Hopefully they help you as you're thinking through your edit. So my style of editing is always kind of, there's a build up and then kind of a drop, and then it gets a lot more intense after that. So that's kind of how I structured it here. I have this beginning where it builds up. There's kind of an anticipation, it holds for a second, and then the music really comes in, and I've got really fast shots with a lot of energy, and then it kind of has another break here in the middle where everybody's throwing the colored powder up in the air, and then it goes to black and then comes back in again, some more really fast shots, and then a few really cool effects. And then here at the end, I wanted to make sure I had like a really cool ending to wrap stuff up. So these are just a lot of the clips that are used, sped way up, cut down to only a few frames, and then like the end graphic just blinking in a couple times. So I still have a few markers in here of just edit notes. That's kind of my process. Sometimes I'll edit over multiple days, so I'll add a marker in and then write down some notes. And I actually ended up using 2 different music tracks for this, and that's something I hadn't really done before, but I started to notice people do this more and more, so I wanted to give it a shot. These two I think blended together really well because one of them didn't have a whole lot of like punch or substance to it. It was just really bass heavy. So I started with that, and it was a really good build-up song, and then that drops off. Then I came in with more of like a rap hip-hop song that really fit the vibe of the event really well. So I kind of merged those two in, and I think that really kept the pacing up. I think if you use one song, which I typically do, it can still be great, but sometimes it just keeps it more interesting to change the music up. So don't be afraid to do that. I also added some sound effects, which again is just makes your edit way better. So I'd highly recommend doing that. This is kind of just like a low tone that kind of powers down. It was actually like a robot powered down. You can see in the corner, it's a robotic functions turning off. So that's from Artlist also. Just thought it was a really cool effect. And then this effect right here, I also have an audio effect on this. So if I go over to the Fairlight panel. I have an automation on here for low pass. So this effect over here, it's just a low pass filter. So you can see as I scroll through, the low pass just cuts off all the high frequencies and has this really cool effect of just barely hearing the low end of the music. So kind of incorporated that with like the slow and fast motion of them throwing the powder up in the air, as well as the sound effects coming in. I thought that was a really cool effect, and then I just brought it back up when the music was cut out so it comes in. Now I want to hit on the color grading too, because I have a few different tips I think might help you on this side. So if I jump over to the color panel, you can see all my clips are in blue over there. That's like footage from my camera. Now the way that I color grade most of the time is I just have a base grade that kind of applies to everything, and then I tweak clips off of that. So the way that I go about that though, because I don't want to apply that grade to every single thing in the timeline, or that would include like the titles and stuff like that. So if I just find a good clip, like maybe this one right here, you can see there's 4 dots up here. This is the grade for the clip. And then we have group post clip, and then on the whole timeline, and then group pre-clip. So I do all my main color grading for the like S-Log3 footage from my camera on group post clip. So that's my whole color grade right there. But to do that, you can either show the clips or go over to the light box and just select all your clips. If I just maybe select these, right click and go to add into a group, or just assign to a group. That's basically what I'm doing here. Is I made a group of all the Sony clips, added a grade on top of that, and then tweaked the actual clip grade individually if it needs some exposure adjustments or something like that. My thought process with this is the group post clip, meaning I convert it to Rec 709, do some adjustments and things like that in post clip. So if I need to do any exposure adjustments, I do that on the clip level. So I'm doing that before it's adjusted to Rec 709, or else I'm kind of just adjusting the final image, which I don't want to do. For this, what I actually do is have a color space transform that converts it from S-Log3 into DaVinci Wide Gamut and DaVinci Intermediate. So I get a wider color space for these effects working in the middle. And then at the end, all I'm doing is going from DaVinci Wide Gamut and Intermediate to using the timeline, or in other words, just Rec 709 Gamma 2.4. And that's our final output. So here, I didn't actually have any white balance adjustments. I adjusted the exposure just a little bit, saturation, put a LUT, and then just a little bit of sharpening. That's kind of a really basic grade, but mostly what I wanted to do here is take it from Sony S-Log3 into Rec 709 in the end. The last thing that I wanted to hit on in the edit side of things is making a vertical cut off of my horizontal cut. Under the finals, I also have a vertical recap version, which is basically just duplicating this timeline, and then right clicking, going to the timeline settings and changing it to vertical resolution 1080p, and then leaving everything else the same. So once I do that, sometimes I'll come in, click on a clip, go to the video settings and click on smart reframe. I think I did that for a few of them, but most of them it really just took clicking on it and adjusting the position left or right to make sure the action is happening in the middle of the frame, and then just scaling down the texts a little bit and some stuff like that. That's pretty much my whole workflow for editing. If you have any more specific questions, like I said, I'm more than happy to answer them if you want to send me a message or comment down on this video. But before I finish up this video, I did want to cover this VFX shot that you may have seen in the video. Right here, it's kind of has this kid running and then zooms out to show this lady's phone filming in the auditorium. So I wanted to walk through really quickly exactly how I did that, and then the intention behind it, which I can cover in here. So really, I just wanted to transition back from the games back to worship, because I just had more worship content. So you can see all through the end, it's pretty much all worship all the way to the end of the video. So I kind of had this games content starting here with this transition with the sound effects and the music and everything, and then it comes back in the game with somebody grabbing a cup. You see a few people focus specifically on them, and then a transition with the flag. So that's all like the outdoor content, but I didn't have a ton left of that, so I knew I wanted to transition back inside for the worship, but I didn't want that to be so abrupt. So I had this idea of doing this where it's just a really cool transition, but now we're back in the auditorium for worship, and then I end out the sequence with that. So I'm going to jump into After Effects and show you exactly how I did that. So this wasn't really the most complicated of an effect. It just took a little effort to make it really sell. I have a few sequences over here. Version 2 is what I ended up going with. And this is all ungraded footage because I did just grade it back into DaVinci Resolve. So I just exported like a ProRes 422 out of After Effects just to retain quality and then retain the color space so that I could grade it with the full resolution in Resolve. So in this V2 sequence, which was my final export of this specific transition, if I hide this top layer, you can see it's just footage of the students outside playing the game, and then I just have it scaled down from there. So actually inside this bottom pre-comp, I have keyframes to just make the footage scale just like that, so it stays in the same size as the phone. And this wasn't necessarily tracked, I just kind of messed with it until it looked good enough. But then given that, back in here, if I show our phone layer, it's basically just transparent up until that phone comes around the sides, and that's just masked out. So inside this composition, that's where all that's happening. It's transparent up until here, and then I just fade into the actual clip, so I don't need to track anything anymore. And then it just finishes to the end. So really how I did this, I did motion track her phone and then adjusted the mask after that. So if I click on it here, you can see I have a mask and then just a bunch of keyframes at the bottom. And it's just feathered a little bit. It was motion tracked, but like I said, I just adjusted it. It's not perfect. There's still some things I would probably change, but I think it was good enough for how short it was. And even with some motion blur I enabled on here, it's much harder to tell if it's exactly lined up perfectly. Well, that's all I wanted to cover for this video. Again, if you'd like to check out the full recap, I'll link it right here as well as into the description. You can check out the final product and then come back here if you want to know any information on how I made it. My goal with all these videos is to help you be a better church video creative. And as I said at the beginning, I just haven't seen a lot of content around recap videos. So I wanted to make this video and explain my process, and I really hope it was helpful. If it was, let me know. And if you'd like to see more of these kind of videos where I just break down a video that I've made, please let me know. But as always, subscribe for more church video tutorials every single week, and I'll see you in the next one.